The galaxy had rules about proper weapon handling. Every species learned them, practiced them, and mastered them over centuries of space combat. Every species except humans. Captain Smith of the Earth Defense Force stood before the Alien Council, his stance relaxed as he held his plasma rifle in what they considered the most incorrect way possible. The council members, tall beings with gleaming scales and multiple eyes, watched in horror as he demonstrated human combat techniques. "Your species holds weapons like primitive creatures," declared Head Counselor Blue, his upper eyes narrowing in disgust. "No precision, no proper form, no respect for the ancient arts of combat." Smith simply smiled. He knew something they didn't: humans didn't need perfect form to be deadly. Their species evolved on a planet that demanded adaptability over perfection. "With all due respect," Smith replied, "we get results." The council chamber erupted in murmurs as holographic displays showed human victory after victory. Despite their wrong techniques, humans had the highest success rate in combat situations among all known species. "Impossible," whispered Counselor Red, his scales shifting colors in distress. "They break every rule of proper combat. Their stance is wrong, their grip is incorrect, they even modify their weapons in ways that shouldn't work." What the council failed to understand was that humans came from a world where survival meant adaptation. Their wrong way of fighting was precisely what made them dangerous. While other species spent years perfecting traditional forms, humans developed hundreds of different combat styles, each adapted to specific situations. The meeting ended in frustrated confusion for the council. They couldn't comprehend how a species could be so successful while breaking every established rule of combat. But as Smith left the chamber, he knew the truth: humans weren't successful despite their unconventional methods, but because of them. Back on his ship, Smith prepared a report for Earth Command. The aliens' rigid adherence to proper technique was a weakness humans could continue to exploit. After all, there was no wrong way to fight when your goal was survival. As he finished his report, Smith added one final note: "Perhaps it's time we taught the galaxy that sometimes, the wrong way is the right way." The incident at the council sparked intense debate across the galaxy. Military experts from various species gathered to study human combat footage, trying to understand how such primitive techniques could be so effective. Lieutenant Jones sat in a combat simulator, surrounded by alien observers. They had demanded a demonstration of human training methods, expecting to find flaws in their system. What they saw instead left them speechless. "You mean to tell me," said Professor Green, a renowned alien combat instructor, "that you teach your soldiers to improvise rather than perfect their form?" Jones nodded, picking up a standard-issue rifle. "Watch this," he said, proceeding to use the weapon in 12 different ways, none of them matching the official manual. He fired from odd angles, used it as a makeshift tool, and even demonstrated how it could serve as a climbing aid. The alien observers frantically took notes. Their own warriors trained for decades to master one perfect form. Humans, it seemed, learned hundreds of imperfect but practical applications. "But how do you maintain consistency?" asked another observer, his tentacles waving in confusion. "How do you ensure quality without standardization?" Jones smiled, remembering his own training days. "We have a saying on Earth: if it looks stupid but works, it isn't stupid." He demonstrated by using his rifle as a lever to move a heavy obstacle, something no alien would ever consider doing with their precious weapons. The debate grew more heated when combat statistics were presented. Human soldiers had a 40% higher survival rate in unexpected situations compared to other species. Their wrong techniques allowed them to adapt instantly to changing conditions, while properly trained alien warriors often froze when their perfect forms proved impractical. "This goes against everything we know about combat," Professor Green protested, his crystalline form flickering with distress. "Your methods should result in chaos, not success." "Maybe that's exactly why it works," Jones replied. "In real combat, chaos is the only constant. We don't fight the chaos, we embrace it. A young alien recruit watching the demonstration raised an appendage. Could you teach us? The room fell silent. The suggestion of learning human combat techniques was practically heresy. Jones looked at the eager young alien, then at the horrified instructors. Why not? Though I should warn you, you'll have to forget everything you think you know about proper fighting first. As the day ended, Jones filed his own report to command. The galaxy is starting to notice. They don't understand us yet, but they're beginning to question their own rigid systems. Change is coming, whether they're ready or not. The humans' wrong way of fighting was about to shake the foundations of galactic military doctrine. And this was just the beginning. The news spread quickly through the galactic military networks. A joint training exercise was planned between human forces and alien military units. Traditional combat instructors were outraged, but curiosity outweighed their protests. Commander White stood before a mixed group of human and alien soldiers on the training deck of Station Delta. The aliens carried their weapons with perfect precision, while the humans held theirs in what looked like casual disregard. Today's exercise will be unscripted, White announced, causing immediate tension among the alien ranks. You'll face unexpected scenarios and must adapt to survive. The alien captain, a tall figure with metallic skin named Silver, stepped forward. Unscripted? But how will we know the proper forms to use? White's response was interrupted by a blaring alarm. The training deck's gravity suddenly shifted, and holographic enemies appeared from unexpected angles. The alien soldiers immediately tried to assume their proper combat stances, and failed miserably in the changing gravity. The humans, however, were already moving. They grabbed handholds, braced against walls, and returned fire from positions that defied conventional combat doctrine. Some even used the shifting gravity to their advantage, letting it carry them to better firing positions. This is chaos. Silver shouted, struggling to maintain his balance while trying to hold his weapon in the prescribed manner. Exactly. White called back, firing from an upside-down position. Real combat isn't about looking good, it's about staying alive and completing the mission. As the exercise continued, something unexpected happened. A few of the younger alien soldiers began copying the humans. They abandoned their perfect stances and started improvising. Their accuracy dropped initially, but their survival rate in the chaotic environment improved dramatically. Silver watched in amazement as one of his youngest troops, who had always struggled with traditional forms, suddenly excelled using human-style adaptable combat techniques. I don't understand, Silver admitted after the exercise. Our traditional combat forms were developed over thousands of years. They're supposed to be perfect. White helped him up from where he'd landed during the final gravity shift. Perfect for what? Standing still and looking impressive? Combat isn't about perfection, it's about adaptation. The station's data banks recorded everything. The results were clear. Units that adapted human-style techniques showed a 60% improvement in survival rates during chaotic scenarios. The traditional units performed perfectly in standard conditions but failed dramatically when situations turned unpredictable. Later that evening, Silver found himself in the station's observation deck, watching Earth through the viewport. "Your planet," he said as White joined him, "it shaped you differently than our worlds shaped us." White nodded. "Earth never gave us the luxury of perfection. We had to adapt or die. Every predator, every natural disaster, every change in environment forced us to improvise. And you brought that same principle to space combat," Silver realized. "While we tried to perfect one way of fighting, you developed countless ways to survive." The training exercise marked a turning point. Word spread through the galaxy about humans' survival-first approach to combat. Traditional military academies faced growing pressure to incorporate human techniques into their training. As White filed his report that night, he included a personal observation. The galaxy is beginning to understand, there's no such thing as fighting wrong if you're fighting to survive. Maybe that's the most important lesson we can teach them. Not everyone in the galaxy welcomed the spread of human combat techniques. A coalition of traditional military academies filed a formal protest with the Galactic Security Council, claiming that human methods would lead to the collapse of proper military discipline. Major Brown watched the protest unfold on the main screen of the human embassy. Beside him, his alien friend and former student, Officer Gray, shifted uncomfortably. "They're calling it the corruption of combat arts," Gray said, his crystalline form dulling with worry. "The old guard is pushing for a ban on human training methods." Brown's response was interrupted by an emergency broadcast. A frontier station was under attack by space pirates, outlaws who had already adapted irregular combat techniques. The traditional defense forces were failing. "This is exactly what we warned about," declared the head of the Traditional Combat Academy. "Without proper form, there is only chaos." But Brown saw something different in the tactical displays. "The pirates aren't using proper form either," he noted. "And they're winning. Maybe it's time to fight fire with fire." A joint human-alien response team was hastily assembled. Brown and Gray found themselves leading a mixed unit of traditional warriors and human-trained adaptives. The tension between the two groups was thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. As they approached the frontier station, Brown gathered his team. "Forget about right and wrong ways to fight. Focus on what works. The pirates won't follow any rulebook, neither should we." The battle that followed would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. The pirates, expecting to face traditional combat forms, were completely unprepared for the chaos that ensued. Human soldiers used maintenance tubes as firing positions. Alien warriors who had embraced adaptive techniques turned their environment into weapons. Even the traditional warriors, seeing the effectiveness of irregular combat, began to improvise. "This isn't combat," shouted the pirate leader as his forces were overwhelmed. "This is madness." "No," Gray replied, using his weapon as both a shield and a club, something that would have horrified him just months ago. "This is survival." The victory was decisive. The combined force of traditional and adaptive warriors had not only defeated the pirates but had done so with minimal casualties. It was impossible to ignore the effectiveness of human combat methods any longer. In the aftermath, Brown found himself before the same Galactic Security Council that had once condemned human techniques. But this time, the mood was different. "Perhaps," admitted Council Leader Purple, "we have been too rigid in our definition of proper combat. The galaxy is changing. We must change with it." The Traditional Combat Academy representatives were stunned. "But the ancient forms," one began. "Will be preserved," Brown interrupted, "but alongside new techniques. The goal isn't to replace your combat arts, it's to add to them. To make them more effective." Gray stepped forward, his crystalline form now shimmering with confidence. "I've learned both ways. The old forms have value, they teach discipline and precision. But human adaptability teaches us to survive. We need both." As the council session ended, a new era of galactic military doctrine was beginning. Training programs would now include both traditional forms and human adaptive techniques. The galaxy was learning that there was room for both structure and chaos in combat. Sometimes, Brown noted in his final report, the best way to preserve tradition is to let it evolve. The galaxy isn't just learning new ways to fight, it's learning new ways to think. The integration of human combat methods into galactic military training had an unexpected side effect: it began changing how species approached problems beyond the battlefield. Colonel Black discovered this while visiting the Galactic Innovation Center. "Your species has infected us with chaos," said Director Yellow, but his tone carried amusement rather than accusation. Now everyone wants to try things the wrong way, just to see what happens. The Innovation Center's main hall was filled with exhibits showing traditional devices being used in unconventional ways. Weapons converted to tools, defensive shields repurposed as energy collectors, and combat scanners modified to explore deep space. We've started asking, what if, instead of following the manual, Yellow continued, leading Black through the exhibits. It's terrifying and exhilarating. A group of young alien scientists demonstrated their latest project, a medical device originally designed for perfect, precise surgery, now modified to adapt to different alien physiologies on the fly. Like human combat techniques, it sacrificed textbook perfection for practical effectiveness. But not everyone is happy about these changes, Yellow warned, pointing to a news broadcast. Traditional institutions across the galaxy were reporting increased incidents of what they called dangerous improvisation. Black watched as the reports detailed various accidents caused by improper use of equipment. But for every failure shown, there were 2 success stories of problems solved through unconventional thinking. "Your combat techniques taught us something important," said a young alien researcher named Orange, his bioluminescent spots pulsing with excitement. Sometimes the perfect solution isn't the best solution. The discussion was interrupted by an emergency alert. A mining colony on a distant moon had suffered a catastrophic equipment failure. Traditional emergency responses were proving ineffective due to unusual environmental conditions. Black watched as the rescue teams, now trained in both traditional and human adaptive methods, approached the problem. Instead of following standard procedures, they combined equipment in ways their manufacturers never intended. "They're breaking every safety protocol in the manual," gasped a traditional safety officer watching the operation. "But they're saving lives," Black replied. The rescue teams used mining lasers as cutting tools, converted atmosphere processors into makeshift pumps, and rewired communication arrays to detect survivors. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't proper, but it worked. In the aftermath, Director Yellow called an emergency meeting of the Innovation Center's board. "We need to reevaluate our approach to technology development," he announced. "The humans have shown us that adaptability isn't just about combat, it's about survival in all its forms." Black found himself invited to speak at the meeting. "On Earth, we have a concept called MacGyvering, using whatever you have available to solve problems. It's not about doing things wrong, it's about being resourceful." The board members listened as Black explained how Earth's harsh conditions had forced humans to become adaptable not just in combat, but in every aspect of life. The same principles that made human combat techniques effective could be applied to technology, medicine, and exploration. "But how do we maintain safety standards?" asked a concerned board member. "How do we prevent chaos from leading to disaster?" "We don't prevent chaos," Black explained. "We prepare for it. We teach people to understand their tools so well that they can use them safely even in unexpected ways." As the meeting concluded, a new initiative was launched. The Galactic Innovation Center would begin studying human adaptability across all fields, not just military applications. They called it the Adaptive Innovation Protocol. Perhaps, Yellow noted in his official report, the humans' greatest contribution to galactic civilization isn't their wrong way of fighting, but their wrong way of thinking. They've taught us that sometimes, the best solution is the one nobody expected. The influence of human adaptability had reached far beyond military and technology sectors. General Stone found himself addressing the Galactic Education Council, where a heated debate about learning methods was unfolding. "First you changed how we fight, then how we build, and now you want to change how we teach," demanded Chief Educator Purple, his holographic form flickering with agitation. "Where does this end?" Stone stood calmly before the council, remembering his own unconventional journey through military academy. Learning shouldn't be about memorizing the right way to do things. It should be about understanding why things work. The council chamber displayed statistics from across the galaxy. Traditional educational institutions were reporting a strange phenomenon. Students exposed to human adaptive thinking were scoring lower on standardized tests but showing higher rates of success in real-world applications. "Look at this data," said education specialist Brown, a reformed traditionalist who had embraced human methods. "These students aren't just learning answers, they're learning how to find answers." A holographic display showed various scenarios. In one, a student used engineering principles meant for spaceship design to solve an agricultural problem. In another, medical techniques were adapted to repair damaged AI cores. The solutions weren't textbook perfect, but they worked. "But what about our traditions?" asked another council member. "We've spent millennia developing our teaching methods. And they're still valuable," Stone assured them. "We're not replacing your knowledge, we're adding to it. Imagine combining your deep understanding with our adaptability." The debate was interrupted by a live feed from a frontier research station. A team of young scientists, trained in both traditional and adaptive methods, had made an unprecedented breakthrough. They'd combined principles from 3 different scientific disciplines in a way that traditional experts had declared impossible. "It shouldn't work," muttered one of the council members, studying the data. "According to every textbook, every simulation, it shouldn't work." "But it does," Stone replied simply. The young research team explained how they'd drawn inspiration from human combat adaptability. Instead of following established research protocols, they'd looked for unconventional connections between different fields of study. "We stopped asking what's the right way, and started asking, what if," explained the team leader, their tentacles waving with excitement. "The humans taught us that sometimes the best discoveries come from doing things wrong." The success was undeniable, but it raised new questions. How could educational institutions maintain standards while encouraging innovation? How could they teach both proper form and creative chaos? The answer came from an unexpected source, a group of hybrid learning centers that had already begun combining traditional galactic education with human adaptive methods. Their students learned the rules first, then learned when and how to break them effectively. "Think of it like learning to dance," Stone suggested to the council. "First you learn the proper steps, then you learn to improvise. Both skills are valuable." Chief Educator Purple's hologram shifted colors thoughtfully. Perhaps we've been teaching certainty in an uncertain universe. Our students faced challenges we never imagined. Shouldn't our teaching methods evolve to match?" The council's decision was unanimous. A new educational framework would be developed, one that preserved traditional knowledge while incorporating human adaptive thinking. They called it the Integrated Learning Initiative. "But where does it end?" someone asked again. Stone smiled. "It doesn't end. That's the point. The galaxy is infinite, and so are the possibilities for learning and growth. We just have to be brave enough to explore them." As the council session concluded, Stone added a personal note to his report: "The galaxy is learning that being wrong in the right way can lead to being right in ways we never imagined. Maybe that's the most important lesson humans can teach." 10 years had passed since humans first demonstrated their wrong way of fighting to the galaxy. Admiral Ross stood at the observation deck of the new Galactic Adaptive Academy, watching ships of various species arrive for the graduation ceremony. "Did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" asked Ambassador Green, now one of the strongest supporters of human methods in the Galactic Council. His crystalline form reflected the light of 1,000 stars. The academy below them was a testament to change. Traditional combat halls stood alongside adaptive training grounds. Classical research laboratories shared space with experimental workshops. Students learned both the proper forms and how to break them effectively. "We're receiving a priority transmission," announced the Academy's AI. "Unknown signal from deep space. No known protocol matches." In the past, such a situation would have paralyzed the traditional response systems. Now, the joint human-alien emergency team sprang into action, applying both structured analysis and adaptive thinking to the problem. The signal's pattern resembles ancient trading codes, noted a traditional communications expert. But with variations that suggest a completely new species, added a human analyst, already adapting the communication arrays in ways their designers never intended. Within hours, they had established contact with a previously unknown civilization, one that had been avoiding the galaxy because they too didn't follow proper protocols. Their unconventional methods had made them invisible to traditional detection systems. "We thought we were alone," the alien representative transmitted. "We thought we were the only ones who did things differently." Ross smiled as he watched the first contact team, a mix of traditional protocol experts and adaptive specialists, begin building relationships with the new species. "This is what we've been working toward," he said to Green. "Not just teaching the galaxy to fight differently, but to think differently." The Academy's main hall filled with graduating students of all species. Some carried traditional weapons with perfect form, others held modified equipment in ways that would have horrified their ancestors. All of them had learned to appreciate both approaches. "When humans first showed us their wrong way of fighting," Green addressed the graduates, "we thought they would bring chaos to the galaxy. Instead, they brought growth. They taught us that being different isn't wrong, it's an advantage." The ceremony was interrupted by a real-world emergency. A nearby star was showing signs of imminent nova, threatening several populated systems. The graduates immediately formed response teams, combining traditional evacuation protocols with human-inspired adaptive solutions. "Watch," Ross said proudly as the teams deployed. "They're not just following plans or improvising blindly. They're doing both." The evacuation became a demonstration of how far the galaxy had come. Traditional ships moved with perfect precision while modified vessels performed supposedly impossible maneuvers. Standard protocols were followed when they worked, adapted when they didn't, and completely rewritten when necessary. Every inhabited world was evacuated successfully. Not because everyone did things the right way, but because they had learned to use every way available to them. "The humans didn't just teach us new ways to fight," Green reflected as they watched the rescue ships return. "They taught us new ways to survive, to grow, to live." Ross nodded, remembering that first council meeting a decade ago. "We never wanted to prove we were right," he said. "We just wanted to show that different didn't mean wrong." As the day ended, Ross added a final entry to the Academy's records: "The greatest weapon humans brought to the galaxy wasn't our unconventional combat techniques. It was the idea that being wrong in the eyes of others doesn't matter if you're right for the situation at hand. We taught the galaxy that adaptation isn't about breaking rules, it's about understanding why the rules exist and knowing when they need to evolve." The galaxy had learned that lesson well. And somewhere out there, new species were waiting to be discovered, each with their own wrong ways of doing things. The future wasn't about finding the one right way, it was about embracing all the ways that worked.